Hello, I'm Nan Simonson. I'm the author of Aging Powerfully. I am all about, at age 71, um, understanding that at any age you could be listening to this and you can be 20, 30, 40, 50. At any age, we are living and aging with however we focus our energies to 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 travel upon. In other words, if you know what, I had an interesting conversation today, and somebody I spoke to gave an age, it was way too young, at which they decided, well, I'll be gone by then. And I said, are you kidding? So I'll finish my thought on aging powerfully. At 70, I decided I was going to go on for another 1, 2, or 3 decades, possibly into my hundreds. And with that in mind, that's my focus. That's my place to go. I better do everything I can to do it well, not to slog through the years and wonder why I'm bothering. So that's who I am. That's my intent. That's what, as a matter of fact, on the back of the book, that is my mission. My mission is to share what I can, that belief system, and then the ways to do it. I am a lifestyle medicine health coach, lifestyle as medicine, and the book is about the modalities that can be adopted to take us through life into our 80s, 90s, and beyond. Purpose is a very important part of that. And today I wanted to share with you something that I just came across, and it is so valuable. I thought, okay, it's rather simple. As a matter of fact, as I wrote, 4 quick power habits we could live by. And they are adopted from other people. I haven't come up with them. So every morning I exercise. It's either a run for an hour or, depending on my length, anywhere from 3 to 6 or 7 miles. And if I'm not running, which I do 4 days a week, it's it's a cycle ride. I cycle 3 days a week. And both of those take about an hour, sometimes an hour and a half if I'm taking a longer ride. And I always use that time to be educated. And I was listening to a Rich Roll podcast, and it was on mindset. And there was a snippet because it was a compilation of just masterful people who had something to share, and he took snippets from previous conversations. And one of them was a snippet of a conversation with a woman, Mel Robbins. So I went back to her original conversation with him going back to September of 2021. What an interesting woman. I'm going to read I'll call it biography. She's a former attorney. She was a CNN legal analyst. She is a best-selling author. She was a talk show host. And now she's one of the most widely booked public speakers in the world. She came up with I'm going to say a career-saving and maybe even life-saving method. One of the simplest things some of you know what I'm talking about, but some of you don't. One of the simplest things you're going to ever hear. As a matter of fact, at one point when Rich Roll, and if you haven't heard of Rich Roll, he was an attorney turned elite athlete. At one time, he was called the world's most fit man because he did back-to-back Ironman in Hawaii, I think 5 back-to-back, and other things. Anyway, but he's very philosophical. He is a recovered alcoholic. He is whole food plant-based and has been for for years. I don't know if it's decades, but it's years and years. He did his best work on plants as an athlete. He was interviewing Mel Robbins, and so I heard both of that snippet part and the longer one. And so I want to tell you about what she came up with. She was in the worst place in her life. As she said, this was the worst time of my life. She had been an attorney, decided she didn't want to practice law anymore. She was hired by CNN as a political analyst, and either she didn't like that anymore or she moved on to do something else. She was offered her own show. Something didn't work out there because everybody was telling her what to do, how to do it, and what to say. She didn't want to do that. So she went through a number of iterations, personal, I'll say professional iterations. She found herself in the lowest place that she had been. And as she says it, let me see where, okay. She said, I was drinking like an alcoholic. I was $800,000 in debt. My marriage was disintegrating. I had no job. And I had 3 kids under 14. She's very smart. She is very talented. But at that time, she was broken. Rich Roll shared something poignant at the beginning of this conversation. And I've heard him with another person a podcaster that I admire tremendously, Dr. Andrew Huberman. He is a professor, a tenured professor at Stanford University of neurobiology and ophthalmology. And you might think, ophthalmology? Well, as he says, the eyes are a part of the brain outside of the skull so that they can clearly give information to the brain to change it. And he does a podcast on a regular basis, and it's Dr. Andrew Huberman, and he gives his time and energy for free at these marvelous interviews or his evaluation of any given thing. And one of the things that he and Rich Roll, that was a powerhouse interview, Rich Roll interviewing Andrew Huberman, whom I often hear interviewing other brilliant people. And they were talking about, again, people who do tremendous things that others can't even imagine having the strength or the power. And I don't mean just physical power to do. And what they both agreed on is the fact that movement trumps motivation, that movement precedes motivation, that mental focus follows visual focus. In other words, get out and do a thing, whether or not there's the motivation for it, because so many people feel that the motivation has to come first and then I'll do a thing. Both of them agree, and this has a lot to do with neuroadaptation. It also has to do, I remember a podcast with Dr. Huberman saying that whatever you do, something as simple as this, I do this all the time now, and I use it because I'm always in the kitchen fiddling with recipes and things, because that's another thing I do. I have a cooking show, my YouTube cooking show, and it's all part of the platform that I use to post these. But in any case, I'm in the kitchen, and it would be very easy to, every time I saw a thing sitting somewhere that looked good, to pop it in my mouth. And Dr. Huberman said at one time that if we break the habit of either popping things in our mouth or doing something that wouldn't be such a good idea, I'll say eating a candy, I'll say taking a smoke, I'll say taking a drink of, let's say, alcohol, and you break that habit, you simply stop yourself from doing it. Again, you're motivated to do it, but action trumps it, so you simply don't do it. Put it back down, and that's what I meant. I'll start to pick something up, and I'll think of him and what he says, and I'll put it back down, because what he says is the more times you break those links, the stronger your brain becomes, because you are controlling it. It's not controlling you. And why am I going off on all of this? Because it has something to do with what you're going to hear right now. Okay, so the circumstance was, and this is when the epiphany came. So she's broken, she's on the couch, she's on her fourth Manhattan, and she's saying, I'm going to, this is my last night like this, I'm going to get up and get back to what I know how to do, which is make something of myself. But she had gone on for quite a while that she was just dispirited and disheveled and at that place, out of work, at the time, no options, and drinking herself into a malaise. And she said she was watching TV, and at one point, a rocket launched. And how do rockets usually launch? With a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, action! And she looked at that, and that was it. That was the epiphany. That was the beginning of what then became her 5-second rule. She wrote a book, a New York bestseller, The 5-Second Rule, and it has been groundbreaking. After, or the next morning, when her alarm went off, she imagined herself a rocket, and she being about to be launched at NASA. And even though she had found herself getting more and more, I'll say, depressed, and therefore more and more difficult to rouse, even in the morning, that morning she woke up. She did her countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and she jumped out of bed. And then she said, once up, now what? And she said that she then understood that she had the power within her to take herself forward, and that any time she was losing direction, feeling anxious, feeling overwhelmed, ready to give up, she would simply count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and take action, some positive action toward what she was looking toward doing, even the smallest steps. And she said, and I haven't looked back. Well, that simple activity, the premise that we can control our forward moving trajectory with something as so simple, or something so simple as a countdown, became something that others, as I said, Rich Roll said, again, at first I thought this was stupid. He said, now I applaud it because there's a certain genius in its simplicity. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pick up the phone that weighs 1,000 pounds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Put out a resume that, or start the resume that you haven't sent. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pick up that donut, put it down, and make yourself a salad. Okay. So much of what we repetitively do, even when clearly damaging, is simply a habit that we can override with an action. It's a habit that says to us, do it, have it, pick it up and eat it. And it's something that we can override with action first. Mel explains, and she explains this physiologically, neurologically. She explains the mind component of this habit-breaking behavior by revealing that this neurologically moves you from a bias of thinking toward a bias of taking action. Reciting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 means that you have already begun that action. The more often you do it, the more often you'll break the pattern of thinking, and the program in the pattern that you are trying to break can be done with new overriding decisions and perspectives to lead you toward the action that is going to change your life rather than continue to be debilitating. Detailing this further, she explains that the cool part of this is that let's see, the cool part about this is that we talk about change, where we are, who we want to be, using the prefrontal cortex, and that the thinking and strategizing part of the brain is in play when we start to think about what we're going to do. The problem is that when we're thinking negative thoughts, or we have fears, or dispirited, or frozen, or procrastinating, it's our subconscious that's in charge of us at that point. If you haven't heard of the amygdala is the part of the brain that is fear-based, that is apprehension-based, and that is responsive to anxiety. And the response tends to be a response from our what we could call lower brain, reptilian brain, animal brain. In other words, the autonomic nervous system that basically, when we are feeling anxious, tends to keep us doing the same thing we've always done. And what she is teaching us to do is break that with a countdown and then an action. Okay, in order to change, you have to interrupt subconscious patterns. The 5-second rule is a form of metacognition that interrupts the pattern that's stored in your subconscious brain. Counting backwards requires your thinking brain, what is that? Your cerebral cortex. It switches you to that part of the brain, the part where you take control over what you think and what you do next. Best of all, anyone at any age can do this because it's easy to do and easy to remember. Some of you know my story. I was, for over 50 years, controlled, and honestly controlled. I may have looked like this, and people thought I was on top of the world. I was running a business very successfully, and actually several businesses very successfully. But I was owned by an eating disorder, bulimia. And it changed 4 years ago when I was able to leave it behind after, I don't have to say decades and decades, I'd have to say it 5 times over, reading a book, Brain Over Binge. And in that book, Catherine Hansen talks about something that she learned from somebody else who helped addicts on drugs, on alcohol, walk away from these same kinds of things, the subconscious telling them what to do, and overriding their analytical brain, their prefrontal cortex. And she said that the habits that we get into, she works with people, Jack Trempy, with people that took drugs and alcohol and were able to break those habits by, well, I'll use the word ignoring urges, because that is Catherine Hansen's words. As it came down to eating, because she works with people and did then, does now, with binge eating disorder, eating disorders, not anorexia, that's not what we're talking about here. That's much, much, much more complicated. And she calls it neurological junk, that when we feel the imperative to do something that's bad for us, quite often it's our subconscious leading us to do what has become habitual, what has become comfortable, and what leads us to a feeling that may be damaging, it may be dangerous, but we do it again and again, and it's the easy way out, and that comes from the subconscious, that comes from the lower brain. And she says the way to break that, and that's how I learned to stop after decades of being owned by it. She said, ignore the urges. Well, this would have been an even easier way to do that, ignore the urges. In other words, I'm being told by my brain, Go do something damaging, Nan. What you've done for the last 50 years. Go on, start a binge. And she taught us to look at that, think about it, and ignore the urges. Well, this gives us something even more, I'll call it physical, to do. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Launch off into something else. Don't give it any more thought. Just launch off into something that will get us where we want to go, because now I've just taken the time to engage the cerebral cortex, which then can weigh and measure the pros and cons and the risk to value equation, and can tell you, it can easily tell me that is not what you want to do again. And it changed her life. She said pediatricians are using this with children with anxiety. Veterans are using this with PTSD. A Pennsylvania psychiatric nursing unit came to one of her talks, the representatives from it, to tell her that of all the tools that they had, this was the most effective. The 5-second rule is simple. It's easy to remember. It immediately interrupts current thought processes, including in the case of that psychiatric ward represented by those nurses, suicidal ideation, by counting back 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then asking for help. That's one of the things they taught their patients to do. Try it, share it with people, because interrupting the patterns of thought and behavior that are holding you back and pushing you to take action by in a negative way with something that can help you think differently is the only way that we're going to change, and this tool can help us achieve it. Then Mel went on, and what I'm going to recommend, I'm going to give you the name of the podcast. Go to YouTube, and it's Mel Robbins and Rich Roll, Richroll. Mel is M-E-L, Robbins, R-O-B. I think she might be B-B-I-N-S, but either one will work. And it's Change is Possible. That's the name of the September 2022 interview. It's a long interview, and there's a lot of peripheral stuff, but it's absolutely very, very valuable. And then she had another, I'll call it epiphany, something else that she learned from. She wrote another book, and her 2 books are entitled The 5-Second Rule and now the High Five Habit. There's also, and you can look for her, there's also a TED Talk that she did that is a highly lauded TED Talk, even though at the very, very end of the TED Talk, she brought up her 5-second rule almost in passing. And she looks back at that and says that it was almost as if she had forgotten it until the last second, mentioned it, but then went on to, quite frankly, reinvent herself with that. The other one, High Five, what is that about? She learned during one particularly disparaging morning in front of the bathroom mirror. She says, I was just there in my underwear, and she gets very graphic about what was so horrible in the mirror. And I'll if you listen to that, you'll laugh about her physical form, starkly apparent in the mirror. I was in front of the bathroom mirror, and she said, I decided, because I was so filled with disdain for what I saw, who I thought I was, that I had to do something to change it. So I gave myself a high five and said, you know what? You're terrific. High five. What does that mean? When you do that, think of kids. As a matter of fact, there have been studies that show that the more high fives, or the teams that had the more high fives, the more people engaged in acknowledging each other, were the most successful of the teens. Isn't that interesting? And not just children, but adults. So she decided to high five herself, and she did it again. Mel, you're terrific. She did it again. Mel, you're actually really attractive. I don't know if she said that. I just made that up. She did it again. Oh, no. I was going to say those hangy boobs aren't so bad because she referenced that. Anyway, and she said that was the beginning of a turnaround for her that she learned to do and that she did every day and that she did all the time. And I want to make sure I get her words here. She said, many of us have a lifetime of high-fiving others, acknowledging others, finding the good in others, not even knowing them maybe, but acknowledging, wow, that was really cool. This mirror-affirming validation is for ourselves, though. Many of us have developed a pattern of being critical of ourselves, and we evaluate ourselves in terms of fitting in and never measure up. This is our way of cheering ourselves on, of building trust with whom we are or we see ourselves to be, and doing it in a physical way to ourselves in front of the mirror. And the mirror is an important part of this, of the equation. Research out of Harvard confirms that taking a moment in the morning to set intentions around a positive self-image will make us more productive throughout the day. A part of our brain kicks in and overrides our negative self-talk. Marrying movement with positive thoughts sets up new neural transmitters. Kind of goes back to what we're talking about. Movement, then the thoughts, and this is physical, and this is actually neurologically valid. This is a way of self-soothing, and it's a physical manifestation of security. You've got this. You got this, girl. You're going to have a great day. Teach the kids to do this. Teach everyone you know to do this. Okay, and then she has another take on the high five, but it's all part of the same thing. To help us break repetitious negative self-talk anywhere and expectations of negative outcomes. We're anywhere, we're feeling overwhelmed with possibly, I don't know about you, but it happens to almost everybody. And we can do that to ourselves all the time. You know what? I really am not good enough. You know what? I'm really fooling everybody. If they only knew. We do that to ourselves, and it's the most damaging thing we can do. So she says, when you're feeling those things, give high fives to your heart. Put both hands overlapping over your heart. It helps soothe us and helps calm a weary nervous system. Both hands over the heart and repeat, it's okay, I'm safe, I'm loved. Isn't that beautiful? It's okay, I'm safe, I'm loved. We have high five. We have the 5-second rule. We have our loving physical attention to our heart, that beating part of our body that keeps us going, but also that's what we consider to be the center of love. Okay, I'll end with just a reminder of those tools, but first I have 2 more for you. And it's all around breath work. I mentioned Dr. Andrew Huberman. I've been doing this since I heard him talk about it 3 years ago, and I brought it up in other talks, and it's called the Physiological Sigh. And it's a calming technique. It is physiologically, neurologically proven, and it's something that our bodies do for us all the time to balance our oxygen and nitric oxide balance in our blood. because if your nitric oxide builds up a lot in your blood, you become anxious. And I can do this in the middle of the night if I wake up and I can't get back to sleep, just to calm me. I can do it before a event that I want to bring myself down a little from, the anxiety or fear or excitement. And the neurological sigh looks like this. It's 2 in-breaths, because we have alveoli in our lungs, teeny little sacs, that the first breath helps puff. The second breath gets the oxygen in there and starts the exchange of the nitric oxide with the oxygen and pushes it out. I said that our body does this. Our body does this throughout the day. Our body, I don't know if you've ever actually caught it, but I have, where all of a sudden I'll go, sometimes it's when I'm awoken. Sometimes I'll oh, I don't know, I've done something that's a little stressful. We all do it when we cry. Because we've got to get that exchange going, because when you cry, you're depleting yourself of oxygen through that activity. And you can do it once, you could do it twice, maybe 3 times, but it really doesn't have to be repeated a lot. It is neurologically calming because we're displacing nitric oxide with oxygen, and we're calming our body. Anytime you have a breath that's longer on the exhale than it is on the inhale, it's calming. When you have a sharper breath and a shallow exhale, some people call that Wim Hof breathing. That can actually bring up your heart rate, and it's excitatory. The in-breath is excitatory, the out-breath is a calming. And so you want to calm yourself, a longer out-breath. Speaking of, the next one, and there are a number of breath modalities, something called box breathing, where it's 4 in, hold, 4, exhale, 4, hold, 4, inhale, 4, box breathing, and it's used in special forces to kind of calm them down. But I like this one, and I've used it also even longer than the Physiological Sigh, because I heard it a long time ago from Dr. Andrew Weil, another Dr. Andrew. This one is Weil, W-E-I-L. And if you Google this, 478, you can actually see him doing it. And that is an in-breath of 4, a hold of 8, in-breath of 4, 4, 7, 8, hold of 7, exhale of 8. And it looks like this. And the goal is to do it 4 times. He says, it's really interesting, because when I saw him do it on a video, it was only a 2-minute video, he said, I'm sorry to have to interrupt now to describe to you and clarify with you what I've just done, because it takes me to a certain physical state that I really enjoy. And I remember when I first heard him talk about this and how it affected him in calming, in bringing him to a slightly different place. 4 ins, and the 4 ins have to be enough to get enough breath. If you just go, you can't hold 7 and out 8. You've got to do a nice full breath, but you do it in a 4 count. Anyway, when I first heard him talk about that, first of all, it took my breath away. I had to yawn, so I wasn't doing it right. And he said, the more you practice this, the more of a benefit you'll get. And he's right. I'll use this sometimes when I can't sleep at night. I can use this anytime during the day. You can use this in your car when you're driving and something has just scared you, like an idiot who cuts you off. I don't know about you, but I'm noticing people completely ignoring red lights. That's another subject. But my husband and I are in awe of the number of people that we watch zoom right through red lights. And things like that, especially if I'm near that intersection, will take my breath away. It scares me, and I need to do something to get it back. So, okay, what are we looking at here? We're looking at some lifestyle modalities. We're looking at some habits you can create. We're looking at some actions you can take. 5-second rule. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Action. We're looking at high five. You got this. You're good. You can do it. You're terrific. Just look at you. You go, girl or guy. You're looking at the physiological sigh. Ooh, that's nice. And then you're looking at 4, 7, 8 breathing. These 4 simple techniques can become habits of choice to move you out of where you may be stuck to actions you otherwise couldn't take, will allow you to remember your value, that you are loved and worthy and great, and to center you when you're either slightly shaken or you just want to be a little more calm just before you go to sleep, whatever. I think that's all I have to say. I hope this was valuable. I wanted it to be simple but meaningful, and you can find Dr. Andrew Weil. You can simply Google 478 breathing. You can find Andrew Huberman, Physiological Sigh. Look for Mel Robbins and Rich Roll and this interview, or the interview that, or Rich Roll's podcast, Mindset. It was wonderful, with all these people that can be so inspirational, who have a handle on making things happen when sometimes we struggle with that. Okay, thank you for watching. I hope you have a great day, because I know I'm going to. Please subscribe if you haven't. Thumbs up. I'm realizing that all those things make a difference. Consider aging powerfully. You'll learn a few things. And take care. Bye-bye.